Young New Orleans Saints stars getting some recognition, changes in the tight end room, and projecting the 2021 tight end roster for the New Orleans Saints, all on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we've got more lists. Now, no more New Orleans Saints were added to PFF's top 50 list, but we'll talk about two players that should have been in the conversation, and we get two players that are added to NFL.com's all under 25 teams. We'll talk about those players, and we'll also take a look at the New Orleans Saints tight end position as we continue our position by position preview, taking a look at the losses, the additions, as well as the players that are returning and projecting the potential tight end group for the 2021 season ahead of training camp. That's what we got coming up for you on today's episode. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your co-managing editor over at CanalStreetChronicles.com, and your Tuesday co-host over at the National Locked On NFL podcast. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints, your team every day. All right, family, we're kicking off today's episode. And hey, don't forget that we also have a Locked On Fantasy Football podcast you could tune into on your favorite podcast apps as well. All those fantasy drafts right around the corner. Some dynasty drafts already underway. So if you want to get the information that you need to be able to dominate your fantasy football league, like that rhyme right there, go and check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast hosted by Vinny Iyer, who is absolutely fantastic of sporting news. All right, so let's go ahead and jump here into these lists, right? We talked a little bit about the New Orleans Saints getting 5 players named to PFF's Pro Football Focus's top 50 list earlier on last week, and they had still had the top 20 to name, and we thought, well, maybe there will be some other New Orleans Saints whose names pop up there, and unfortunately, there were not. So it's still just the 5 New Orleans Saints that were named within nobody within the top 25, right? You had Marcus Williams at 48, Michael Thomas at 44, immediately followed by Teron Armstead at 43. Then you had Alvin Kamara at 39 and Ryan Ramczyk at 28. Now, the New Orleans Saints had the most players named on that top 50 list with those 5. No other team had as many or more than the Saints did, but I felt like there were still maybe some players that ended up getting snubbed in this list. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a pair of players that could have made this. Now, I'll throw in an honorable mention as well, so we'll talk about 3. Marshawn Lattimore is the first player that makes the absolute most sense to me. He's one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. Yes, he has talked about his own inconsistency, things like that, which he feels like has been blown out of proportion. He still had a very, very good season last year. So I was a little bit surprised to not see him at all within the top 50. I'm not just talking about the top 20 where no Saints were named, just within the top 50 as a whole. And Pro Football Focus tends to show a lot of love to Demario Davis, who had yet another spectacular season last year, continues to be a leader on the defensive side and a top 5 linebacker in the NFL, in my opinion, particularly when you talk about inside linebackers, right? Edge rushers, outside linebackers, I put them in a different category, which is that edge rusher category. Linebackers, I'm talking about coverage guys that do a little bit of everything. And I thought Demario Davis might have actually made it into the top 20 just because I know how much Pro Football Focus usually loves Demario Davis. So I was a little surprised to see him not at all named within the top 50, period. An honorable mention goes to Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan had a bit of a down year last year, coming back from offseason surgery, stuff like that. Says that he feels absolutely rejuvenated now coming into 2021. So maybe he plays himself into that 2022 list when we circle back around this after the 2021 season. Now, let's get to another list that was made, and these are basically teams that the NFL.com did. This is the essentially all under 25 team for NFL.com, which of course refers to all of the players on this list at their respective positions are under the age of 25. 2 New Orleans Saints making this list, one on offense and one on special teams. The one on offense is Eric Mccoy, New Orleans Saints center, and I'm going to say that confidently now. It seems like that ship has sailed. Eric McCoy should be staying at center for the New Orleans Saints with Cesar Ruiz continuing to learn at left guard. 2019 second round pick, started all 35 games, and according to this list, allowed only 15 total pressures and 1 sack on 677 pass blocking snaps in 2020. Absolute efficiency and has been absolutely outstanding. And one of the things that they also say here is that when you get somebody that comes in and has immediate success in your draft class, like Eric McCoy, that it helps to sustain or a perennial contender. The NFL.com list here calls the New Orleans Saints, which I thought was interesting. Eric McCoy, only 23 years old, joined by fellow New Orleans Saint and fellow 23-year-older, I guess, is Deontay Harris, the return specialist and wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. They talk a little bit about how if you thought he was going to be a one-hit wonder, you were absolutely proven wrong in 2020, and you would definitely believe that. He upped his average from 9.4 yards per punt return or per return to 12.2 yards in his second year, and before his injury was on pace to be top 10 in both punt return average and kick return average as well. He dealt with a little bit of missed time with the neck injury last year, and one of the other things they shout him out for is his ability to get a little bit more involved in the offense, which we saw in 2020. 20 catches for 186 yards and a touchdown. That follows a 2019 rookie season where he came in and had only 6 catches for 24 yards, and that was it. So I think you'll continue to see that number move up as he continues to be a part of the New Orleans Saints offense, as well as being this undrafted free agent rookie all-pro returner as the, big market here. Look, I'll be honest here. I think Deontay Harris could be a star in the NFL. It just depends upon how much he's able to get involved in the offense. But I even think as a returner, he can become a bit of a household name, kind of like those Dante Halls, I don't want to say Devin Hester's because I don't want to call him and say, this guy's going to be absolutely historic or anything like that. I don't want to get ahead of anybody, but I do think that he could be one of those returners that people kick away from and that everybody knows. All right, y'all, coming up next, we're going to dive into the tight end position. We're going to start off with the losses, the additions, as well as the returning players at the position. Then we're going to take a look at how that 2021 roster could shake out at the tight end spot. So I have that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And if you have anything going on within the world of sports that you want to get in on the action with, go ahead and check out our good friends over at BetOnline.ag, our exclusive online betting partners. They're fantastic, and they have odds and props and bets for just about everything that you can imagine. Of course, the NBA Eastern Conference Finals continues today. Will Trae Young play? Will he not? The current spread looks like he might not play. So if you want to get in on that, go and check it out over at betonline.ag. You can also continue on with the NHL Stanley Cup Finals after the Tampa Bay Lightning took the lead there, and all of the other sports that are going on around the sports world. So go and check them out, betonline.ag. When you get there, don't forget to use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, to get a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. That's promo code LOCKEDON for a 50% welcome bonus at betonline.ag. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, continuing our position by position preview of the tight end position this time as we continue on through our journey over the course of the offseason here to make sure that you know every single name on that New Orleans Saints roster. So let's start off with the tight end position and the losses for the position going into 2021. These are players who were on the roster in 2020, no longer on the roster moving forward. We're not including players like Cole Wick and Jason Vanderlaan because they opted out prior to the 2020 season. So really, you only have 2 big losses here at the position, or 2 losses. I'll let you decide whether or not they're big to you or whatever. But Jared Cook being number 1, and then, of course, Josh Hill being number 2, longtime Saint with Josh Hill as an undrafted free agent coming in out of Iowa State. Jared Cook came in and last year had 37 catches on 60 targets for 504 yards. Shout out 504. That's pretty exciting. And 7 touchdowns. He led the team in touchdowns. He was also the 3rd most targeted player on 3rd down with 20 targets over the course of the season. The leader in that was Alvin Kamara with 24, so only 4 behind the lead there. He is now with the Los Angeles Chargers, and I know a lot of New Orleans Saints fans are out on Jared Cook. They were kind of happy to see him go. You saw some miscommunications between he and Drew Brees. Of course, the fumble in the playoff game, 2 ill-timed fumbles at different points and in different games throughout the season. I completely understand, but you're losing 60 targets, 504 yards, and your leader in touchdowns from the 2020 season. Now, ideally, Michael Thomas is healthy coming back into the 2021 year, and you hardly miss that production in that case. Josh Hill was only targeted 10 times in 2020, had 8 catches, 46 yards, and 1 touchdown. As a whole, with that being the case, he's now moved on to the Lions and then retired soon after. But as a whole, between he and Jared Cook, basically what you now have vacated are 70 targets, 550 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which I think the Saints can pick up not only elsewhere around the tight end position, but also in the wide receiver position. Again, keeping in mind that you had a very abbreviated season for your star wide receiver in Michael Thomas. Now let's get to the additions that come in over the course of this offseason. Veteran Nick Vannett was added early on in the offseason. Bit more of a reputation as a blocking tight end, but does have some passing production as well, some pass catching production as well, particularly the 2018 season with Seattle, where he had a great season there. 29 catches on 43 yards, 29 catches on 43 targets, 269 yards and 3 touchdowns in that season. Stands at 6'6", 250 pounds. He's right about basically being exactly where Josh Hill is in terms of his size and capability to be able to be utilized. On the total of his career, 75 catches, 686 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He spent some time with Denver and Pittsburgh after starting his career with Seattle, now in New Orleans trying to fight for a roster spot. The Saints also added Dylan Sainer, an undrafted free agent out of Iowa State, the exact same trajectory that Josh Hill took. Had 26 catches, 312 yards, and 1 touchdown during his career there. Listed on the New Orleans Saints roster at 6'6", 270 pounds, so a bit of a bigger tight end in that case. Again, undrafted, coming out of Iowa State. Great blocker, but also wants to be able to do more as a pass catcher. Great interview with he and Dylan Sanders over at the Canal Street Chronicles YouTube page, which I'll link in the description, as well as in the show notes over on the podcast side as well, if anybody wants to go and check that out. Now, this is a little bit of, I'm kind of blurring the line here between returning and addition, but it's an addition to the position. So I'm going to include him here in this section. Juwan Johnson, right? He's been on the team as a wide receiver, came in as an undrafted free agent last year, but now he's transitioning over to the tight end position. So he's new to this spot. I think that this is a good move for Juwan Johnson. Does it settle his idea in terms of making a roster spot? No, not necessarily. We'll project the roster here in the next segment, but does it increase his chances? Yes, absolutely, because he's fighting in a much less crowded room than the wide receiver room. I had 4 catches for 39 yards in 2020 with the Saints, was utilized sparingly all throughout the season, but did get some reps and some opportunities. Fantastic blocker. I mean, an excellent blocker downfield, in line, wherever it is that you want to use him, but a little bit undersized for the position. 6'4", not bad, but 231, a little bit smaller. I've had some people ask me, how much weight does he need to put on, when really it's a balance thing, right? It's put on as much weight as you can while also maintaining the things that will make you special at the tight end position, and like his short area quickness, his speed, those, his leaping ability, those things have to be retained while also bulking up. So it's whatever the right balance is for him there, as opposed to a specific number that he should look for. All right, and to wrap this one up, your returning players at the position, of course, Adam Trautman, 15 catches on 16 targets last year, which is just outstanding efficiency. 171 yards and 1 touchdown. He was also a fantastic blocker, which was really the concern with him coming into his rookie season last year out of Dayton, was how quickly can he adjust to the blocking game of the NFL? Answer, quickly. He did it very, very quickly. And now he's ready to take on the lead in that position group for the tight ends. Looks like he's ready to take on a leadership role there, especially when you talk to him about it. He seems to light up around the idea. And then Garrett Griffin also continues to return with the New Orleans Saints. He's been with the team for quite a while. Came in as an undrafted free agent out of Air Force during his career with the New Orleans Saints. And I want to stress this because we'll talk about him more in the next segment. During his career with the New Orleans Saints in the regular season, 1 catch on 1 target for 4 yards, no touchdowns. That came in 2017, his rookie year. In the playoffs, he's got 2 catches for 12 yards, including 1 touchdown against the Philadelphia Eagles in 2018. He played the H-back role for Air Force. So you saw him line up in the backfield a bunch for the New Orleans Saints as well at fullback. You also saw him line up sort of as that inline blocker, extra tight end as well at different points throughout the season. So he has a really specific skill set, and he's been with the Saints for a while, which is not for nothing. Now we'll see if he can get projected into the 53-man roster here in the next segment as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And as you continue to listen through, whether you're listening during your maybe lunch break or you're listening at some point later on in the day, if you're starting to feel a little bit of a drop in energy, I've got the perfect thing for you to help you in the future with that. And of course, it's Built Bars. You're talking 4 or 5 grams of sugar in a protein bar that's covered in 100% chocolate and legitimately tastes like a candy bar. 9 incredible flavors that are good, but this bar is also good for you. High in protein, high in fiber, which we never get enough of in our daily diets anyway, when it comes down to fiber for sure, but also low in carbs, low in calories, low in sugar. They're the perfect protein bar, incredible flavors, and a bunch of rotating limited edition flavors over on the website at builtbar.com as well. So go and check out those limited edition flavors, grab your first box or your next box. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you're doing, just use the promo code LOCKED15 because no matter what, they're going to give you 15% off of your purchase. First time, next time, whatever it is that you are, new or returning customer, you get 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at builtbar.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode now, taking a look at the projected roster for the tight end position as we continue to look ahead position by position here. We talked a bit about the returning players as well as the new additions that are in the mix. And I do have a new addition making the roster, which makes sense because there's only 2 returning. So how many of those returning players end up making the roster? Adam Trautman, of course, is the answer to the absolute lock on this roster. He's not going anywhere, obviously. I mean, the guy was fantastic last year as a blocker, great in the passing game when he was called upon. Now he gets to take a much bigger role in this offense with 2 quarterbacks, whichever one ends up winning that role, and Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston, that rely on the tight end position quite a bit, and they can spread the ball around, including to that spot. So Adam Trautman will carry a large amount of responsibility going into his just second season in the NFL, but he seems mentally ready for it. Now we just need to see how he's able to translate it all out onto the field. Adam Trautman is your tight end 1 going into 2021, as far as I'm concerned at this time, June 29th. The second player to make the roster, and for me, tight end 2 on this team, will be Nick Vannett. That's who I'm predicting. A ton of experience in the NFL, came in. He's been in the NFL for a while, has moved around to a bunch of different teams, and has been serviceable for the teams that he has landed on, particularly as a blocker. You could see him maybe stepping into the Josh Hill role quite a bit, being a blocker, but somebody else that you can kind of rely on every now and then in the passing game. Tight end screens are something that he's run a bunch over in Seattle, in particular, earlier on in his career. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe the Saints would be willing to utilize him in that type of an arena, just like they did for Josh Hill. And then my final projection for the active roster is going to be Garrett Griffin. I mentioned earlier before, 1 career catch, 4 yards, no touchdowns. He's got 2 career catches in the playoffs and 1 touchdown. And yes, I'm projecting him to make the 53-man roster, which probably makes me sound insane, and I'm okay with that. But Garrett Griffin has been with this team since he came in 2017 from Air Force and has done every single thing that he's been asked in the backfield, in line, wherever it is that you're able to utilize him, you can. And Garrett Griffin is somebody that I think knows this system like the back of his hand at this point and deserves an opportunity and should be able to produce on top of that opportunity, make good on that opportunity if given during training camp. And so my kind of long shot maybe here for the roster is Garrett Griffin. I think that he makes it. And yes, I think he makes it above Juwan Johnson, who's transitioning and going to another position and learning a position that he's never played before in his life. Meanwhile, Garrett Griffin has played this position with the New Orleans Saints, has been on their practice squad, knows their scheme, has been utilized in playoff games before, and has been utilized as recently as the 2020 season. Even though he wasn't targeted, he was on the field. He's a great tight end 3 option for you, and I think that he ends up making the roster. Now, I will give Juwan Johnson a shout out here. I think Juwan Johnson could potentially go back to the practice squad here. The Saints had 2 tight ends on their practice squad last year when they were holding on to Tommy Stevens. And then also you had Garrett Griffin on the practice squad last year as well. So I'm going to take 2 practice squad tight ends out of this, or potential practice squad tight ends out of this, being Juwan Johnson, who's transitioning over to the position and will need more time. It could potentially be a game day elevation when the Saints need, a heavy run game or something like that. He'd be a fantastic option for them. And then I'm also going to send undrafted free agent out of Iowa State, Dylan Sainer, to the practice squad as well, because he has the capability to be able to become a Garrett Griffin later on down the line, to where he spends a couple of years on the practice squad and then eventually gets an opportunity, or maybe even as soon as this year if injuries set in, or if he's a game day elevation, or even as soon as next year, depending upon what this team looks like and what this roster looks like, gets another opportunity at that time. So Adam Trautman, tight end 1, Nick Vanette, and Garrett Griffin, your backup tight ends, and then practice squad eligible folks that I'll be looking to see might be able to make the practice squad as tight ends, Juwan Johnson and Dylan Sainer. So that's our tight end position projection going into the 2021 training camp portion of the offseason. We'll see how training camp affects all of these projections and all of these players, but at least now you know the names and who to look out for. All right, family, coming up tomorrow, it's midweek fundamentals. So we're going to take a look at zone blocking and gap/man blocking as well. Talk a little bit about the offensive line and what it is that works best for Alvin Kamara and the Saints offense all together. And we'll talk about all of that. Talk about those assignments, what that means, and we'll take a look at more all throughout the week, including, and something that I want everybody to think about here as well, if you want to contribute to the show, what do you think the 2022 NFL draft need will be for the New Orleans Saints? Great question posed by Pro Football Network earlier on Tuesday morning. Be interested to hear what Saints fans think about that. As we continue on, make sure you go and check out the Locked On Today podcast. Get all the news of the day in less than 20 minutes, wherever you get your podcast. And of course, we'll see you back here tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Saints. As always, I appreciate everything that you do to support the show. You can find me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them and trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.